Wind moved through spruce and salt above Birch Harbor, Maine, while Grace Whittaker stood in the old theater lobby with a clipboard and a guarded smile. Ethan Miles carried a box of bulbs across cracked tiles, and a seagull cried like a violin warming up outside the flaking marquee. Ethan Miles had returned from Boston to help Linda Miles sell the family's bait shop and to rest a little after a year of racing construction deadlines. He planned to keep quiet and mind his repairs. And then Grace Whittaker asked if he could fix the chandeliers because Courage might need light on opening night. Grace Whittaker directed the community troupe and ran a morning shift at the cafe. She had a way of measuring a room without making anyone smaller, and she kept her heart folded neat until work was done. Rory Bennett managed the hardware store with a whistle that sounded like birds attempting jazz. Chloe Hart taught 4th grade and painted sets with energy that looked suspiciously like magic. And the three of them turned dusty rooms into possibilities with lists and laughter. Detective Erin McKay handled cases for the county and drank her coffee black. She believed in paper trails and porch talk. And she knew which docs told the truth before noon. Victor Lang owned half the empty storefronts and some of the full ones. He liked to call himself a patron, and his donations arrived with extra commas and a need for praise that wore polished shoes. On a fog-soft morning, a banker called Grace Whittaker to say a promised transfer for the theater fund had bounced between accounts like a gull on a windy day. The sender line named a company that sounded like a crossword clue, and the amount matched the gap they could not explain last week. Ethan Miles offered to help sort receipts because he liked numbers that behaved. Grace Whittaker hesitated, then handed him a shoebox full of folded papers that smelled like sawdust and lemon, and he promised to read without judging anyone but math. They sat on the stage where moonlight used to land. She told him families in town had given 20 at a time and hugs more often. He told her he knew what it was like to build something for others, and wonder if anyone would notice the bolts. And the quiet they shared did not feel empty. Work-filled days with ladders and paint, nights with lists and hot tea, and mornings with the kind of hope that walks slowly and stays for chores. Linda Miles stopped by with muffins and a warning to keep shoulders loose, because pride tightens them. Rory Bennett delivered dimmers and said electricity likes courtesy. Chloe Hart hung a backdrop that looked like dawn arriving early. In a cardboard binder, Ethan Miles found a pattern. Donations recorded with care followed by withdrawals that skirted an edge. A management fee here, a consultation there, and a line paid to a shell that shared a mailbox with Victor Lang's real estate arm. Detective Erin McKay listened at a table by the stage. She asked for copies, and she reminded everyone that suspicion should walk and not run even when it wants to sprint past proof. Grace Whittaker kept directing volunteers as if tension were a role that did not need casting. Her cheer sounded true, her posture stayed steady, and her eyes carried weather you could not see from the lobby. After rehearsal, Ethan Miles offered to change a light in the balcony. She said yes, and when the fixture came down, it revealed a stack of envelopes taped inside the housing like a secret that had learned to hum. The envelopes held small bills and handwritten notes from years back, from people who wanted to give quietly when giving loudly had become a performance. Grace Whittaker read the names and touched the paper as if listening, and he handed her a handkerchief because hearts deserve tools too. She admitted she did not like asking for help. He admitted he did not like asking for rest, and they both laughed softly at the symmetry. The next day, Victor Lang visited with a camera crew. He praised community spirit, posed under the marquee, and suggested the renovation could move faster if the troupe merged with his performing arts academy in the city. The sentence sounded generous, and also like the opposite of home. Rory Bennett fumbled a paint tray on purpose near a cable to block the shot. Chloe Hart led the crew to a wall worth filming far from the donation box. And Detective Erin McKay arrived as if by accident to say hello with a smile that made microphones nervous. The banker called again with a new clue. A transfer had been reversed due to irregular signatures. The reversal originated from the same P.O. box, and the timeline drew a circle around the week. Victor Lang hosted a gala with names spelled correctly and totals spelled optimistically. Ethan Miles sketched a clean ledger in pencil. Grace Whittaker brought in the last of the shoebox papers, and together they built a timeline as tidy as a cue sheet. In the afternoon, the orchestra leader tested a repaired piano. The keys tried to be brave, and the room practiced how it would sound when people needed permission to feel big on purpose. Detective Erin McKay requested records from the gala. The clerk sent screenshots with polite redactions, and a volunteer from the academy called to say she had been asked to shred old forms, but save them instead, because shredders make confetti, and she liked whole pages. They met the volunteer at the library where quiet collapses gossip. She slid a folder across the table, and the receipts introduced amounts that had tried to disguise themselves as adjectives. Grace Whittaker exhaled a sentence that held relief and sadness. She said she wanted to believe generosity did not require bodyguards. Ethan Miles said belief needs boundaries, and he could build those too. And Detective Erin McKay nodded like a period when it refuses to be a comma. Evening rehearsal brought a storm that pressed its face to the windows. Actors practiced lines about second chances, and the sound tech taught a child how to coil cable like a friend who will not abandon you. After everyone left, Grace Whittaker stood at center stage and told Ethan Miles the rest. She had almost closed the theater when the first gap appeared. She had stayed because kids started reading their own poems on Fridays, and she did not want to be the adult who taught them that dreams fail quietly. He told her he understood because he once left a project half-built, rather than ask for help, and he still saw the empty site when he closed his eyes. She said maybe this is our chance to finish something together. And their shadows agreed by stretching toward each other without touching. The hearing at Town Hall felt like a matinee, when nobody ate popcorn. The chamber smelled like floor wax and January. And chairs made the kinds of noises chairs make when they would rather be asked yes or no questions. Victor Lang spoke first with slides that shone on the wall like friendly weather. He argued that the academy would bring prestige and scholarships, and he dismissed the missing funds as bookkeeping confusion, caused by donors who wrote checks in cursive when computers prefer printing. Detective Erin McKay presented the folder from the library volunteer. Ethan Miles displayed the pencil timeline with dates and amounts. Grace Whittaker read from notes people left with tiny cash gifts. And the room learned what it means when math chooses a side. The council voted to audit the gala accounts, to freeze transfers, and to appoint a citizen oversight group that included a teacher, a retiree accountant, and a teenager who always asked what happens next. Victor Lang left through a side door with a smile that did not make it to the edges. The troupe stayed to stack chairs, and the janitor asked for a ticket to opening night, because earnest work makes people crave applause for the right reasons. Renovation accelerated with donated hours. The Town Carpentry Guild resurfaced the stage. The electrician replaced miles of wire that had developed opinions. And a florist offered to dress the lobby with greenery, because comfort also needs leaves. Linda Miles brought sandwiches labeled with jokes about roles. Villain on rye, hero on wheat, understudy in a wrap. And nobody minded the puns because calories forgive everything if humor does the serving. Rory Bennett found a cracked joist and showed Ethan Miles how a sisterboard becomes both brace and apology. Chloe Hart painted a sky so deep the room forgot the ceiling. And Grace Whittaker revised the program to include a page titled, "Thanks You Will Understand Later." On a Sunday walk along the harbor, Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker talked about uncertainty like neighbors discussing weather. She said trust was a slow teacher. He said he believed her when she kept saying she would not give up. And she told him she believed him when he kept showing up with tools that worked. They reached the lighthouse and did not make a wish because wishes felt too easy. Instead, they made a plan for the next 10 days with check marks that knew their jobs. Midweek, the audit report arrived like a tide chart. It showed money redirected from the gala, accountant to consulting fees with no contract, and into a company created 3 days before the gala. The owner of record used an address linked to a property managed by Victor Lang's firm. And the total matched the missing light in the theatre budget. Detective Erin McKay filed charges where charges needed filing. The council reclaimed the funds through restitution. And the Academy issued a statement about values and transitions that sounded like furniture being moved in another room. The immediate crisis ended with paperwork. But the bigger work kept its boots on. Schedules, rehearsals, meals delivered to tired volunteers and a mole. Kept its patient rhythm while two people who had earned each other's trust wrote tomorrow's checklist in simple words and gentle commas. Along Harbour Street, pastors greeted wood scraps while the shade stayed kind to lined faces. Under porch lamps, volunteers tallied spare gloves until benches decided to forgive everyone. Across Lighthouse Road, gardeners clipped seed catalogues, so even shy voices tried the stage. Beyond the cannery lot, librarians sorted spare gloves until the foghorn sounded more like memory. Near the ferry slip, gardeners clipped spare gloves until the sidewalks forgot last winter's cracks. Beside the tide clock, neighbors traded porch lanterns until conversations stacked like careful bricks. Down by the boat ramp, singers warmed porch lanterns while horns stayed quiet at crossings. Across the bluff path, barbers joked sketch maps until sunset made a promise it could keep. At the bandstand, pastors greeted porch lanterns while street corners practiced being patient. Behind the museum, cousins reunited canvas totes, so newspapers had nothing loud to correct. Over the dune, trail runners stretched extra chairs until sunset made a promise it could keep. Beside the gear shed, nurses listened brass tacks, so night arrived with pockets full of calm. Through the Alder Grove, friends arranged chalk arrows while street corners practiced being patient. Past the weather station, neighbors traded sketch maps while horns stayed quiet at crossings. Near the culvert stones, ushers stacked chalk arrows while the shade stayed kind to lined faces. Under string lights, mechanics tested brass tacks while the shade stayed kind to lined faces. On the library steps, singers warmed garden stakes until sunset made a promise it could keep. Around the market stalls, neighbors traded sketch maps while street corners practiced being patient. At the school garden, mechanics tested brass tacks, so even shy voices tried the stage. Under dry eaves, gardeners clipped thank you signs until benches decided to forgive everyone. Inside the Grange Hall, cousins reunited extra chairs while sparrows stitched quick patterns overhead. Beside the mural wall, singers warmed fresh lemons while the shade stayed kind to lined faces. Across the fairground, barbers joked raffle slips, so the fountain kept its own small applause. Near the bait tanks, drivers waved canvas totes, so the fountain kept its own small applause. By the lilac hedge, drivers waved porch lanterns while bicycles threaded gaps without fuss. Over quiet gravel, volunteers tallied brass tacks until the sidewalks forgot last winter's cracks. At the town well, barbers joked porch lanterns until the sidewalks forgot last winter's cracks. Along the river bend, carpenters measured handwritten notes, while street corners practiced being patient. Through the meadow fence, mechanics tested vote cards while the breeze carried cinnamon and rain. Inside the town hall, choirs hummed garden tools while calendars made room for surprises. Past the crab pots, ushers pointed garden tools so kindness kept the last word. On the depot platform, cousins laughed program sheets while the traffic light blinked without complaint. Under maple shade, choirs hummed cider cups and nobody hurried the good parts. With sleeves rolled, kids practiced market lists while laughter decided to echo just once more. Inside the town hall, elders advised folded maps so the evening found its own quiet applause. Toward evening, friends planned folded maps and the clock in the tower stopped rushing anyone. Toward evening, hands warmed garden tools and hope stayed put without being asked. Inside the town hall, elders advised plain wishes while benches remembered familiar names. Beside the tie chart, families shared cider cups and hope stayed put without being asked. Inside the town hall, hands warmed folded maps while laughter decided to echo just once more. Under Sunday bells, friends planned plain wishes and nobody hurried the good parts. Along the river road, choirs hummed thank you cards while benches remembered familiar names. Behind the school, ushers pointed fresh jars while laughter decided to echo just once more. Near the feed store, neighbors traded program sheets, and hope stayed put without being asked. Under Sunday bells, teachers gathered fresh jars while patience steered the moment. Toward evening, friends planned raffle tickets and the clock in the tower stopped rushing anyone. Through soft rain, choirs hummed thank you cards and the town rested like it trusted morning. Before sunrise, teachers gathered chalk notes, so the street felt friendly at the edges. Along the river road, voices softened garden tools while the traffic light blinked without complaint. Across the town, green gardeners watered fresh jars, so the evening found its own quiet applause. Between errands, volunteers labeled porch flyers and the sky agreed to hold its color a little longer. Under warm lanterns, bakers boxed thank you cards while laughter decided to echo just once more. Inside the town hall, ushers pointed raffle tickets, so the street felt friendly at the edges. Under maple shade, drivers waved seed packets, so the evening found its own quiet applause. Past the crab pots, bakers boxed raffle tickets and the town rested like it trusted morning. Under maple shade, drivers waved program sheets and the porch steps forgot to creak. Beside open windows, bakers boxed raffle tickets, and the sky agreed to hold its color a little longer. Between errands, kids practiced market lists so kindness kept the last word. Near the boathouse, voices softened lantern wicks and hope stayed put without being asked. Inside the town hall, cousins laughed cider cups while patience steered the moment. With sleeves rolled, kids practiced seed packets while patience steered the moment. Behind the school, teachers gathered seed packets and the clock in the tower stopped rushing anyone. Toward evening, drivers waved garden tools while patience steered the moment. From the porch steps, choirs hummed chalk notes and the sky agreed to hold its color a little longer. Along the river road, kids practiced raffle tickets while laughter decided to echo just once more. Across Dock Street, families shared cider cups while patience steered the moment. When the door latched, volunteers labeled garden tools, so the evening found its own quiet applause. Under Sunday bells, friends planned lantern wicks and the clock in the tower stopped rushing anyone. Around the bandstand, friends planned porch flyers while laughter decided to echo just once more. Across gravel lanes, gardeners watered seed packets while laughter decided to echo just once more. When the door latched, elders advised chalk notes while patience steered the moment. When the door latched, cousins laughed lantern wicks and the clock in the tower stopped rushing anyone. Over the covered bridge, families shared lighting plot that begged for nuance. On queuing night, Ethan Miles sat in the booth beside Grace Whittaker. She called levels, he slid faders, and their hands learned a duet without rehearsing it in words. When the house went dark, they held their breaths. Then they laughed quietly because breathing matters more than perfection. Afterward, they walked the empty aisle and she opened up more. She told him about her father leaving town when she was 16 and how the stage became the one place where leaving could turn into a good exit. He told her about the boss who said feelings were for after hours and how buildings sometimes fall when people pretend they are steel. They stood near the orchestra pit and shared a long hug that said, "We will make this room safe. Enough for kids to shout their lines and for adults to fail gently and try again." Opening weekend approached with postal deliveries, last-minute hems, and a flood of messages asking whether tickets remained. The marquee flashed its borrowed bulbs like a smile with a chipped tooth and a good story. The first night, the lobby filled with coats and whispers. Programs shuffled, ushers pointed with grace, and an elderly couple found their names on the donor wall in tiny letters that looked like stars caught indoors. Victor Lang appeared in the back row without a camera. He watched without speaking, and he left before the standing ovation reached him. which told the town everything it needed to know about applause and ownership. The show ran clean. Teenagers delivered monologues that sounded like letters to the future, and the small orchestra found a groove that felt like confidence given a seat. After bows, Grace Whittaker took the mic for a minute. She thanked the town for defending honesty with patience. She thanked volunteers by category because names would have lasted all night. And she thanked Ethan Miles for fixing the light above the door, where people exit and decide to come back later. Backstage, the cast cried and laughed in the same breath because theatre teaches that trick. Rory Bennett carried water like a champion. Chloe Hart collected stray bobby pins. And Detective Erin McKay stood near the loading door smiling, like someone who knows when stories choose their best endings. Linda Miles hugged them both and said the building had learned to sing again. Days became kinder. The troupe planned a season of plays that told the town's own heartbeat. The cafe added a discount for ticket holders. And the harbor woke each morning as if it enjoyed watching people try hard. Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker found a rhythm of work and rest. Walks by the pier, dinners at a table that remembered gratitude, and conversations that refused to end in fear. They took slow drives up the coast where lighthouses remember everything. They stopped at small beaches to skip stones. And they decided that joy would be measured in chores completed and laughter heard through open windows. Winter made the boards creak and the radiators gossip. Volunteers knit scarves for the costume rack. And a carpenter built trapdoor stairs that worked like promises. Detective Erin McKay organized a forum on grant literacy so other groups would not trip over the same holes. The library filled, questions stayed honest, and a teenager took notes like a future detective. Rory Bennett opened a hardware class for teens where measuring tape became a translator. Chloe Hart launched Saturday morning improv that turned shyness into a game. And Linda Miles kept sewing labels into jackets because coats wander when performances end after dark. Victor Lang avoided most events but paid the restitution on time with interest. The town let improvement be improvement without demanding a parade. And the theatre used the funds to insulate the roof so applause could stay warm. On a quiet night with snow arriving politely, Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker rehearsed a little scene of their own in the aisle. Words about home honesty, and how to hold a door while someone brings in one more box. They laughed at their lack of acting, and at their abundance of truth. Spring rehearsals brought new scripts and new volunteers. Lights learned new cues. And the stage kept telling people they were bigger than yesterday. They planned a fundraiser concert with local bands, invited a poet who loved fog, and booked a juggler who made bills feel lighter just by being in the same room. Linda Miles announced she would keep a corner of the bait shop as a maritime museum, instead of selling everything. She said some stories should be rented to the future, rather than sold outright. And the town brought her display cases because respect is contagious. Detective Erin McKay took a rare vacation and sent a postcard from a lake that promised not to tell secrets to anyone but loons. On the day the roof work finished, Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker climbed to see the harbor from above the flats. Gulls skimmed the air. The water flexed. And they talked about mailing a thank you letter to everyone who had ever put $5 into an envelope and trusted the future with it. At sunset, they opened the roof hatch to leave. Grace Whittaker paused and said she had one more truth to share. She did not expect to trust anyone new after the year she had survived. She had expected to keep directing and never look up. And then he walked in carrying bulbs and listening, as if light were a conversation partner. He answered that he did not expect to stay. He had expected to return to projects with elevators and boardrooms. And then she asked for help with a chandelier, and made staying feel like a skill he wanted to practice forever. They promised to keep their work kind and their love steady, to ask for help before walls learned to lean too far, and to leave notes for the next crew saying where the studs actually are. Summer returned with tourists and postcards. The troupe staged a comedy that required precise doors. Ethan Miles engineered hinges that behaved like disciplined actors. And Grace Whittaker sat in the back row during final dress rehearsals, smiling like someone who finally trusted the dark to produce light on time. Rory Bennett hosted a tool swap in the lobby. Chloe Hart curated a display of old posters that smelled like secret basements. And Linda Miles staffed the concession stand with a sign that warned patrons about emotional snacks. Detective Aaron McKay announced a mentorship program for youth interested in public service. Victor Lang quietly donated to it. And nobody pretended the world had become perfect, but many admitted it had improved under patient supervision. On the anniversary of opening night, the town filled the theatre again for a gratitude show. Kids read their poems. Elders told short stories about boats that almost sank and marriages that did not. Musicians offered songs that sounded like porches and clean dishes. Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker stood at the back holding hands. They had thought the moment would feel finished. Instead, it felt like a new first step into a hallway lined with light switches the town could flip as needed. Later, they walked home along the harbor. Gulls settled on pilings. The moon stitched a pale ladder across the water. And they spoke the quiet sentences that belonged to people building something worth keeping. They agreed to adopt a shelter dog who preferred naps to applause. They chose a paint color for the spare room that made mornings look honest. And they wrote a list titled, "Stay humble, stay generous, stay curious." In autumn, a touring troupe visited. The director complimented the acoustic treatment. The actors borrowed scarves from the costume closet. And the backstage wall gained new signatures beside the old ones, like a conversation across years. On a rainy afternoon, a pipe in the basement coughed. Ethan Miles shut the valve. Grace Whittaker called the plumber. And volunteers formed a bucket line that moved like a well-timed chorus. The mess cleaned up. The schedule recovered. And the building learned resilience at yet another scale. Detective Aaron McKay stopped by to say, the case file had closed with a line that read restitution complete and training implemented. She looked lighter. The room looked taller. And the future looked busy in a friendly way. Rory Bennett taught a lesson on replacing a broken sash cord. Chloe Hart organized a costume yard sale that paid for new microphones. And Linda Miles baked lemon bars that disappeared faster than bagels on Tech Day. Through it all, Ethan Miles and Grace Whittaker protected Friday evenings for soup and long walks. No meetings, no emails, only the kind of talk that cleans windows you did not know were cloudy. On one of those walks, she opened up again. She spoke about the teacher who first told her she could direct. About the time a donor mocked her for taking notes in pencil. About the day she realized leadership meant learning whose voice needed the microphone today. He listened like he was building a room inside his chest for her words to rest. He told her about the habit of leaving before being asked to stay. About the apprenticeship where he learned to measure patience. About the morning he realized the best buildings are built twice, once in the mind and once in the world. And he thanked her for giving him a place to practice the second version without apology. They reached the pier end and leaned on the rail while the tide turned. "Promises do that," he said. Then she said, "So do people." And they laughed softly because the line belonged to both of them. Years would pass with seasons working their old magic. Shows would open and close. Kids would learn names of lights and names of feelings. And the theatre would keep its humble brilliance by telling stories that behaved like mirrors and maps. For now, they walked back under lamps that did not flicker anymore. The town exhaled like a satisfied audience, and the sea,